Hello and welcome to Reviews. As always, I'm Plume Noir, and yeah, there's cardboard, so JR is going to rub up against it. I don't know where Butters is at, but JR is going to probably work his way into this. Um, this is my review of Jawbreakers God King. Here it is. I put it back into the Gemini mailer it came in. Now, I was going to work the joke that, it's God King G0D-K1NG. I was going to call it G0D-Kong, because I have this kind of thing with, like Kesha. I always call her K$Ha, because if you're going to put the symbol into the word, I'm going to pronounce it. You made a choice not to use an S. I'm going to say $, and I was going to kind of do that, calling, K1, but it's obviously to do that the entire review would just be a pain in the ass. So I'm just going to stick with God King. As you notice, I do have my notes in here. Just a few things I want to point out. Okay, go on, JR. So this is Jawbreakers God King. This is the second Indiegogo that your boy Zach, Richard Meyer, has put out. Before I get to the book proper, I'm also going to pull out the poster. So let me slide this over here, and here is the poster, which is, let's see if I can flip it over, Cyber Zashi. I'll pull back here so you can see the whole thing. The problem with the daylight video. You do get this in the book. It is a full page splash at the end of her story. Looking pretty thick. Doing the typical thing where she gets the armor around her, except around her boobs. You would think that would chafe right in here. That would probably, and then you have the sternum one here for no reason. And anyway, it's a cool design. I'm not really into posters. I do love cheesecake art, but like the Zashi poster before, I'm just going to kind of put it to the side with the book itself. So I just want to show that off. It's a good looking poster. So as for the book itself, I'm going to take a look. There's multiple stories in this. One of them is even written by Chuck Dixon. It's The Origin of Devil Dog. We do have the final chapter for the God King series. It was started in the first, Jawbreakers Lost Souls, and then finished in this book. We do get the respawn story of Zashi, basically how she became the cyber Zashi we see there. And then a final story. It's not that long, completely different from everything else. The Desolation Wave Master Slave. And JR is now trying to climb into that Gemini mailer. So, anyway, so I'm going to pop into this book. Again, with square bound books, it's kind of hard to do one-handed. That's what she said. We do get a nice little several pages that kind of recaps everything. One thing I will say is that there are some scenes that were in the previous Jawbreakers that seem to be set up, like with the crime Chalk, the crime lord Chalk, where most of Manhattan is under mental control of the God King, and basically, as he calls them, they're adult crybabies with short attention spans. So when Silkworm decks him, no, actually it wasn't Silkworm. Was it Cuffs? One of the other characters, I'd have to dig it back out, decks him. They have to hug it out so that people think it's just street performance art. And Chalk was one of the lucky ones that he was able to keep his mental faculties, but he couldn't act on anything. Why he was chosen to do that, it's never really said. And sorry, I got JR over here. So I was kind of hoping we see more of why some people could keep their minds while everyone else was just under control. We don't really see that, and it was a nice little setup. Plus, we had that little Doctor Strange moment where they were taken out of their bodies. Not that part isn't really expanded upon. So we cut in with, basically, old Nemesi are brought back from the dead for them to fight. And so we get some good fight scenes on this. We get the bickering. It's basically, between Cuffs and Silkworm. It's the Think of it like Cyclops Wolverine back in the day, constantly, trying to one up each other, kind of at each other's throat. We do get to see that interplay. Um, and how they're going to take on the God King, but they can't seem to get along. And Knife Hand has now been freed from his ninja clan, so he can go and get revenge against his father. So he kind of, leaves the reservation to go do his thing, and um, kind of betrays them because he steps away from the mission. Um, I got some post-it notes you may notice here, because there's a few things I wanted to mark out. Overall, the art on this is a lot better than the previous one because it's consistent. Now, I understand why the art was kind of inconsistent in the first Jawbreakers because it was older books, older stories put all together. Um, so it really helps flow. One thing I will say is this page, where Knife Hand takes an elevator, chops the cable off, rides the cable through the roof. I kind of cover it there, just so I can mark the page, and uses his powers to cut down buildings. And that's the one thing I will say. While this looks good, I feel like this should have been maybe more dynamic. It's almost, with it only being like 1/5 of the page, it's like, okay, what exactly is he doing? You turn to the next page and you see he's able to knock the building down, and yeah, it's now between two buildings. This looks great, by the way. As someone who draws, as well, I know what a pain in the ass it can be to draw buildings and streets, especially from a bird's eye view. This looks great. I just kind of wish this would have been maybe like a bigger page. It just seems like for something so cool, it's kind of wasted on this panel. Just maybe a nitpick. Um, I don't obviously want to give away the ending. Um, so I'm going to kind of jump around a little bit here. I'm going to go to the pages I've marked. Um, this was a problem I had with some parts of this book. Now, remember, the Jawbreakers are um, former superheroes turned mercs. And so this is obviously late in their career because not everyone walks out of this alive, which is kind of sad because I'm finding myself, I like these characters. But because of that, since we are late in their career, they go down. Where are they at? It's Hudson River, and they go and find this giant mech that they had defeated, sometime previously. Now, because Jawbreakers are not like an ongoing series, there's really no setup for this before. This comes off almost as a Deus Ex Machina, where it's introduced, it's a major plot point, but we have no setup for this before. Um, if you're going to do like these pages here, it would have been great if they would have had maybe one page showing some of their previous adventures, not just in the book, but things they've done as superheroes, and they could have had a picture of them fighting this giant mech and how it ended up at the bottom of the water. But no, the recap pages are pretty much just recapping what happened in Lost Souls. So I'm kind of weak storytelling on that, because you can always put in anything to solve the story. Like, oh yeah, they did this 3 years ago. We haven't shown that story, but there you go. That's how they got it. Kind of weak sauce on that. I'm going to skip ahead here, and there are some parts where the dialogue is um, kind of too on the nose, maybe, like when Hell Priest and Knife Hand are trying. They're fighting over how the God Gun should be used. It has one shot to take out the God King, and when Knife Hand proves that he hasn't actually gone off the reservation, um, Hell Priest says, "It wasn't me, Cuffs. It was Knife Hand. He was one of us after all." I don't know why, but that kind of stuck in my craw. Um, and we find out that the God King is actually imagine Franklin Richards, and he actually hates you know being the kid of the Fantastic Four. Think of it more like Rusty Venture from the Venture Brothers. Is probably a better analogy. Who actually hated being a kid, Venture, or being the sidekick. It's Rusty Venture taken to the next level, where he's just full of hate and what happened to his life, and how he's basically, it's almost embarrassing to be the kid's sidekick for the heroes. My elbow just cracked. Did you hear that? So I like the way this ended, the main storyline. So I'm going to pop over to the next story, which is Zashi's. Basically, how she comes back, as you know, the cyber, um, gang lord in Africa. Here he is, his corpse is rotting, and his armor's like, yeah, screw this, I'm out of here. And it finds Zashi's corpse. You know, when I heard that Zashi was going to be coming back, I wondered how exactly they were going to do this. This was so obvious. I don't know why I missed this. Um, let's flip over here, because I do like her motivations, why she's so angry. So here she is, she's in her cyborg armor. She's attacking the Jawbreakers in their vehicle, and she says, you left me. And, Cuffs is telling her, I heard your neck snap. I thought you were dead. And she starts crying. Then why didn't you bury me? It's a good point. It it's really a good point of why she's, it's a good backstory. Why she's so angry. Why she's mentally unhinged. Of course, being dead for a little bit of time. I'm sure there is a little bit of decay that the cyber armor couldn't, fix, but bringing her back to life, and she has that whole "you let me die." Um, the way this story ends leaves it in a way that they could bring her back very easily. She's not gone. And I would like to see her be brought on in future Jawbreaker, as a team member. You could still keep it as the whole tension, because there's a lot of tension in this group. They don't always get along. Um, so yeah, I did like this little part of the story. What I didn't think I'd like, and I mean nothing against Chuck Dixon, I do like his writing, but the Devil Dog segment, where it's basically his origin story, and it goes on for quite a bit. And I'm not the type of person that's really into war stories, but I found myself just really just into this. Especially the part where they have to take bits of armor. Their helicopters crash. Part of it's over here. The nose of it's 200 meters away, and they're pinned down with gunfire. So they basically tape him up in armor, and he has to go out and walk to it to get to the radios. And so it's kind of like, think about Tony Stark in a cave with a box of scraps. Yeah, it's pretty awesome. And you feel for this character, because, this is a character that has basically nothing. All he has is war. And, yeah, I didn't think I would like Devil Dog as much, and so, again, he was killed in the previous issue, so it's kind of sad we get an origin for a character that's now already gone. And then the last story is the Desolation Wave, which, think of this kind of like Fifth Element, Blade Runner. Like, what's going on in Blade Runner? They always talk about things going on in space, but we never actually see it. I kind of felt like this is the kind of thing that we would see out there, where the replicates are actually more like these long, skinny people. But basically, they mine some unobtainium stuff, and but the people that mine it are getting sick because of it. So they set up the slaves, and the slaves can't revolt. They're genetically engineered. And what happens when all the masters are killed? So we get some really nice scenes where, I'm going to pull this off here, because this is the master guy, Dan, who slaps his slave. Have I displeased you? You disgust me. For you to see me weak, dying, a pathetic, soulless creature like you. I could comfort you. I could love you. Love me? You mean touch me? Let me touch you, do anything to you? Anything but hurt you. And that's all I want to do. So yeah, you have these angry masters. They are disgusted by the slaves that they made that maintain the machines that mine the unobtainium. It's kind of interesting. Think of like There Will Come Soft Rains by Bradbury. Basically their civilization here, their whole mining planet for the Empire, can self-maintain. Doesn't even need the masters anymore. So, Dan's revenge he proposes is when they die to leave the slaves in charge. And that's kind of a special hell for them because they're needed to maintain the machines. They got incredibly wealthy from all this mining that they do for the Empire, but he sees the slaves as, you know, beneath them, and they can't enjoy it. They can't really prosper from it. As he sees it, they're a limited species. It's a nice little story. Not very long, but supposedly this is a setup for another story that Meyer will be doing, in the future. So completely, completely different than what came before it. So, that was just a quick run through because I don't want to give away any big plot points. How did I think about this? What did I feel? The art is a lot better. The art is pretty good, and even though it's different artists, it still keeps a kind of consistency. There's not a huge drop in quality or huge difference. The Afghanistan stuff is nice and gritty, but not overly so. There was a couple points where it was kind of hard to figure out, exactly what was going on. At one point, Knifeblade gets his Achilles tendon cut, but the blood spatter kind of goes like this, and where did the blade come from? It was a little bit unclear at first. So, what did I think of this book? I'm going to go 1 o'clock. I gotta switch hands here. I'm going to go 1 o'clock here. I did like Lost Souls. I have to be honest, I overall like this better. If I had any complaints, it would be, now I understand Meyer has a whole thing in mind. He's going to do stories from both the past and the future, stories before God King and stories after. And without giving anything away, there's not a lot left of the Jawbreakers. So going forward, it'll be kind of interesting. But I like this team. I really do. And I want to see more adventures of them. I if I had a desire, I wish some of the backup stories in here, the later stories, would have been more the team before this. We get to see some of their other adventures. But when you have something like this and you pretty much wipe a good portion of the team, by a third of the way through the second volume, this is going to be a reference that your boy Zach would probably appreciate, because I'm going to go back to the 80s. It kind of reminded me of the first season of Sledgehammer. Sledgehammer was a goofy parody show of cop shows of that time, and where Sledgehammer, talked to his gun, and the end of the first season, the city is destroyed, by a nuclear bomb. And it's supposed to be a big cliffhanger. How are they going to solve it? Because they didn't know if they were going to actually be renewed for a second season. And it turned out that they were renewed. So how do they solve that cliffhanger? Well, all the stories in the second season take place 5 years before the first season. And they just kind of ignored that. So it's basically going to be kind of like this. If we want to see this team, it's going to be everything in the past, which isn't too bad with comics, because this series doesn't really say it takes place exactly what year. It could be 5 years in the future, and things that we see are happen. If they go forward, we'll see them happening now, if that makes sense. Volume 3 could take place in 2020, while the events of this take place in 2025. Other than that, there There was one thing that kind of bugged me, but I can't really say too much about it without giving anything away. But it involves the last page and a scar. And that kind of bugged me. I'm not sure if that was on purpose or an artistic mistake. When you read this, you'll understand what I mean by that. But I can't really discuss it without giving away the ending. So overall, 1 o'clock. I enjoyed this. I really have been enjoying Meyer's work. It has that very classic, comic book style. There's no agenda being pushed. There's, not insulting the reader. It's like, okay, here's a story. And you could tell that Meyer is really liking what he's doing. He's having fun, and he is, how do I want to say this? His heart is in his work. A lot of comics I'm reading these days, it just feels like, oh, well, I'm getting paid a couple $100, which is what it feels like they're only making, to write out 22 pages, and then, maybe I'll introduce a new character that will make it into the MCU, and I'll get credit on that. That's really what comics feel like, for the most part, 75% of them, at least of the mainstream ones. And I'm not getting that with this. I'm getting the feeling that he's really enjoying what he's doing, and when he says that, he says it somewhere, maybe in the back page here. Yeah. I hope you have a great time reading Jawbreakers, God King, and that it'll become a prized possession in your home. Share this book with your family or friends. That's why we made it. I get a real sincerity from that. And from someone who started, basically, who got famous basically teasing people like Heather Antos, it's that whole put up or shut up. They said, okay, well, you make a comic. And he did. He's made several now, and they've done very well, and they have been enjoyable. Even, what's his other one? I always blank on the name of it, the Western one. He's got the new one coming out of that. Should be sometime early next year. Why am I? Iron Sights. I was just drawing a blank on Iron Sights. Iron Sights, I enjoyed that. The art wasn't that good, but it was still an enjoyable story with better art, more with a clearer art style. I think it would do very well. So yeah, 1 o'clock on this. I'm looking forward to more, and I'm so glad that we're seeing the pushback in the industry. And I think that we're going to be seeing more Indiegogos, the crowdfunding, be in the way of comics in the future. So as always, thanks for watching. It is Christmas Eve. If you celebrate, Merry Christmas. I don't know if I'm going to get another video out today or tomorrow because, well, it's the holiday. So, as always, thanks for watching, and have a good one.